Colts Nation. Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your co-host Cody and Derek, and we have a very special guest on with us today. Ruben C. from Believe in Texans is joining us today to help preview week number 2. First time the Colts and Texans will meet down in Houston. My friend Ruben, how are you doing, man? How are you feeling that football is finally back and we're kind of into the swing of things a little bit?
Man, first and foremost, thank you guys for having me on. And, it feels great. I cannot find a better way to waste my Thursday nights, Sundays. And I think I can say this for both our franchises. I think this is the most excited we've been for a very long time. A new head coach, a new polarizing rookie quarterback. Obviously the Texans added Will Anderson Jr., but for Texans fans, this has been one of the most exciting times in years.
Yeah, absolutely for you guys. And of course, you guys stirred up a ton of attention in the first round of the draft last year. Obviously, acquiring Ohio State quarterback CJ Stroud and Alabama edge rusher Will Anderson. I want to talk with you, Ruben, about CJ Stroud because I'm a giant Ohio State fan. Okay. I loved CJ Stroud, and nothing would have made me happier to get CJ Stroud to come to Indy, but I had a feeling that he was probably going to get taken before Indy's pick, which obviously ended up happening, and obviously went with you guys in Houston. I'm obviously rooting for CJ in a way. And how are you feeling? I know it's been only one game, so we can't really take too much with it, but how excited are you having CJ Stroud now as the quarterback in Houston?
Man, CJ Stroud has just done everything right since being drafted. Me and my other co-host Hardy, we were at the draft party, and after him and Will Anderson Jr. were taking the draft, they went on the jumbotron and were talking to the fans. Right, first interaction, and the first thing he did was bring up Will Anderson Jr. He was asked, "What do you bring to the Houston Texans?" I go, "Well, my teammate, my brother Will Anderson Jr. He brings ferocity. He brings all this." So you love to see that from him. Then the pads came on in training camp, and just CJ Stroud just looked like the better quarterback out there. His accuracy was just off the charts, man. And, when you saw him out there, he looked like a franchise quarterback. We are excited for CJ Stroud. And, the way he talks, he's just so humble. He absolutely deserves this. He's fought for everything, didn't even start in high school, wasn't even put on at Ohio State until his buddy talked to the coaches. So, we are in love with CJ Stroud down here in H-Town.
Awesome. And just want to ask you also, looking at the trajectory of this 2023 Houston team, obviously a year ago, you guys were fighting for one of the top spots, ended up, which we are still pretty glad about. You guys ended up beating us and helped Indianapolis secure the number 4th overall pick, and you guys moved down to number 2. But how are you feeling about this Houston team this year? One game in, 0-1 right now. Both of our teams are 0-1. How are you feeling about this Houston team so far? A team that, kind of similar to Indianapolis, is kind of in a rebuild mode in certain ways.
Well, we feel real good. Us as fans, we knew that Baltimore was going to be an L. We said our week 1 is week 2 against Indy. And but when you see this Houston Texans team, the defense is there, led by new head coach Demeco Ryans. This swarm mentality that he has been preaching, right? It stands for special work ethic and relentless mindset. This defense has it. They were just on the field too much against the Ravens. The offense, they're without 3 starting offensive linemen. You lost Kenyon Green for the year. Your center, who you traded up for Juice Scruggs, is out for the next 3 weeks, as well as Titus Howard, who the Houston Texans just extended. So from the offensive perspective, you see what they want to do with new offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick, but when you are down 3 starters, it is very hard. Overall, encouraged by this team, and this week 1, it's a must-win for us. If you guys come into H-Town and beat us, that will be so demoralizing to this, morale, because we've been on a high since we've hired Demeco Ryans, traded for CJ Stroud, traded up for Will Anderson Jr. We are expecting this game as a win for the Texans. It's a must win for us.
Well, I mean, it doesn't. It's never been a lack of entertainment when it
Mhm.
comes to Houston versus the Colts as of recently. Always been a fun matchup, regardless of who wins or loses, or even ties for that matter. So that
You had to
that
bring it up.
definitely is always fun. But two things for you, Ruben. This injury report, I was just pulling it up from Houston's side of things. Certainly seems like a lot of guys on it
Mhm.
right now. Half of the list, I'll give credit where it's due. A lot of guys were full participants today, so it seems like a bunch of these guys are coming in here. But I see Jimmy Ward being out, Jalen Petrie being out with the did not practice, John Michie being limited, even Laramie Tunzel having an issue.
Mhm.
I mean, you got a bunch of these guys here that are on these limited things. I mean, what's your feeling on it? Are a couple of these guys not going to be in for this game?
Yeah, no. So I expect, as I mentioned earlier, the three offensive linemen, but they're already out. Jimmy Ward has been dealing with a groin injury, didn't play against the Baltimore Ravens, and has not practiced all week. I don't know if he's going to be available. Jalen Petrie was hospitalized, during the Baltimore Ravens game with a lung injury, was coughing up blood. Thank God everything's okay. Did not practice. I, I don't know if he suits up. Laramie Tunsil will play. John Minchie is practicing. But adding to the three O linemen, your two starting safeties might be out. And both of these guys are captains for this Houston Texans team.
Gotcha. Yeah. And then going into that, so obviously the two rookie quarterbacks, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, both are really good friends. What is your feeling toward Anthony Richardson? You saw this last week, tried to put together the win against Jacksonville. They almost pulled it off, but it just fell up short. But Anthony Richardson, what's your take on Richardson through week one?
I mean, this guy is special. I don't care that he only started 11 games in college. You look at his body, he can make all the throws. He's going to be durable. He is special, on the move. I go back to his touchdown against LSU, fakes the guy in the air, spins around and finds a gator in the corner of the end zone. I I would have loved Anthony Richardson here as the Houston Texans, right? He's been viewed as a project coming in, but if he gets it going, he is going to be special. A rushing touchdown against the Jags. I was encouraged by what I saw from Anthony Richardson, man. He looks like a dog. And he dropped that rap video, man. Shout out to him.
Yeah, Stroud was mentioning that at the media day earlier. Yeah, that's pretty funny. I don't have. I mean, Cody, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it because you and I never talked about that. Like, I think that's pretty funny, but like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah. Heck yeah. I mean, I tell you, man, the Colts never had a quarterback like Anthony Richardson in more than one way. And that was impressive, man. I mean,
Yep.
whew. But anyway, going back to this game real fast, man. We mentioned Anthony Richardson. We
Mhm.
mentioned the Colts offense, who showed some things against the Jaguars. Ultimately, they came up short in the end in the fourth quarter, but they were moving the ball, especially in the passing game. Anthony Richardson, obviously, we know what he can do with his legs, and you see kind of what happened with Houston in their first game. Some of the stuff that they allowed. How do you feel about Houston's chances here? To potentially contain Anthony Richardson and kind of maybe try to slow down this Colts offense. What do you think is some of the things that Houston needs to do well and Indy needs to do well? Some of those matchups that you think will ultimately determine who wins Indy offense versus Houston pass defense.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you got to do is try to keep AR-15 in the pocket. Is that going to happen? No. Just like the Houston Texans against Lamar Jackson last week, you're not going to be successful 100% of the time, but you got to do, the sack on third down by Will Anderson Jr., the sack on third down by Jonathan Grenard. Those are the type of plays that you need. You're not really going to ice Anthony Richardson, but you got to hope to contain him. The matchup that I am watching is your tight ends against this because y'all targeted y'all tight ends a lot against the Jags. And without Jimmy Ward, without Jalen Petrie, that is going to be a interesting matchup to see. Also, Michael Pittman Jr. against Derek Stingley. this is going to be a matchup that everyone wants to watch. Us Texans fans, we still feel like we drafted the better cornerback. We took Derek Stingley ahead of Sauce Gardner, and he had a great showing against Odell Beckham Jr. last week. And Pittman, man, he's a legit wide receiver one, a true matchup for Derek Stingley. Those are really the two key matchups I am watching. If we cannot, keep AR-15 in the pocket, he just kills us with his legs, because I believe Lamar led the Ravens with 38 rushing yards, and Pittman just going off. I mean, it might not be a good day for the defense.
Yeah, it'll be interesting how the Colts attack the field, especially going deep if you're not going to have some of your safeties. But the big question for the Colts offense going into it, I think more has to do with the run game. Last week, the Indianapolis Colts, outside of Anthony Richardson, were only averaging about a yard per carry on the ground. So we were having struggles, and we don't know if Quentin Nelson is going to be available to play in this game. He didn't practice at all this week yet. He's been dealing with a toe injury that's kind of had him uncomfortable right now. But, I mean, we saw the Colts last week were really bad. And, I mean, you guys outside of Lamar Jackson, I mean, nobody really ran the ball very efficiently on you guys either. So you have this Colts offense that's already shown their inability to run efficiently, and a defense in Houston that in the past has had difficulties stopping it, but right now seems to be on the right track. But we are supposed to get Zach Moss back, who in the last game last year against you guys ran for over 80 yards on you. How confident are you in the Houston's ability to stop the run on Indy?
I mean, with that JT, I feel very confident. JT has destroyed the Texans many times, but without him, I do love me some Zach Moss. But the Houston Texans defensive line is built to stop the run with head coach Demeco Ryans. I mentioned that swarm mentality earlier. It's not just one Houston Texans making a tackle; it's many. We also had one of the few games with missed tackles we had in a while. That's praise to head coach Demeco Ryans. But you have Sheldon Rankins there. You have Malik Collins there. Both of those guys are there to eat up the run. And then your two edge rushers, Will Anderson Jr. and Jonathan Gennard, played very well. No Baltimore Raven running back had over 38 yards on us. So, I mean, if JT's there, maybe I'm saying I am worried about this D-line. But without them there, and also, like you mentioned, we don't know if Quinn Nelson is going to play. I might see the Houston Texans D-line with the advantage.
Well, flipping it over to the other side of the ball, no, if the Colts have had some injuries, on their O-line, because they've had a couple guys, dinged up this week. I mean, Houston certainly has had some issues with their offensive line, like you mentioned. Now, this was a game, last week against Baltimore where you guys allowed 5 sacks on C.J. Stroud in his first ever game. Now, Indianapolis comes into this game with a couple players playing pretty well. Players, you guys know over the years, DeForest Buckner, what he's able to do in both the run and pass game. And then also Kwity Paye, who actually had a really strong week number 1. And then you have a couple other defensive linemen in here. So how do you feel about kind of that matchup with, having to try to protect CJ Stroud, against this Indy pass rush, which, has been spotty in the past, but at least in week 1 showed a pretty strong outing against Jacksonville?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned that this is a must-win for the Texans, what could ruin our day is y'all's defensive line. DeForest Buckner went on a tear against the Jags. And, Kwity Paye was in the backfield consistently. CJ Stroud being sacked 5 times, it should have been more if he wasn't so shifty and agile. You also have 2 stud linebackers, man. Your front 7 is very dangerous. And I could see the Colts trying to take a huge advantage over them the way Baltimore Raven did, because they were just blitzing these linebackers like crazy. CJ Stroud was getting consistent pressure. And with this offensive line, it is that bad. I could honestly say that. And I feel like when you go against a very good defensive line like what the Colts had, I don't want it to be on full display how bad it is, but that could have ruined our day.
Yeah, he mentioned the defensive linemen. Didn't even mention the 2 of the linebackers that in week 1 had
Zaire
90
Franklin,
plus overall grades in PFF. That was EJ Speed, who had the highest grade of any linebacker in all of the NFL last week, and Zaire Franklin, who was in the 90s as well, who finished with 18 tackles last week. And then, of course, Shaq Leonard, who's just now coming back. I mean, the linebacker core is the one thing, and it's definitely a strength of the front seven.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest weakness for the Indianapolis Colts is clearly the secondary, because outside of Kenny Moore, there's really not a guy back there for us that has started for more than basically 2 years. Who is the guy on your offense that you need to have take over in the secondary in order to give Houston a chance to move the ball?
I mean, it has to be your tight end, Dalton Schultz. With the Dallas Cowboys, was one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Only targeted 2 times last week against the Ravens. You cannot have that. Right now, the Houston Texans, in my opinion, do not have a wide receiver one. Is it Nico Collins? We don't know. This is the first time we are going to see Tank Dell heavily involved. The Texans, a really fun third-round pick. But Dalton Schultz needs to get a good connection going with C.J. Stroud. Move the chains. We saw what C.J. Stroud did on 3rd and shorts, converting with veteran wide receiver Robert Woods, multiple 3rd down catches. But I think Dalton Schultz, for me, is a player that needs to get it going if the Houston Texans want to find success.
Shifting over to your guys' running game, Dameon Pierce, we know what he was able to do last year. Kind of came onto the scene and had a pretty good rookie season. Last week, he didn't have a great game against, that Baltimore secondary. 11 attempts, 38 yards, averaging about 3.5 yards per attempt. So it was solid, but nothing great. And, we already mentioned kind of the front seven for Indianapolis with Buckner, Grover Stewart, who's an elite run defender, Kwity Paye, who can also stop the run, and Samson Ebukam, who's no slack either. How do you feel about your guys' chances, if we're talking about, how Houston can take away Indy's run game? How do you feel about your chances and Indy's chances to, potentially stop that running attack? What will it take? What does it take for you, in your mind, for Houston to establish that run and really have Dameon Pierce get going in week number 2?
I mean, you're going to have to feed him the ball. Only 11 carries is not something you want to see Dameon Pierce have, but when you're down 14 plus points, right, you're not really trying to run the ball, you're trying to throw. But they need to establish the run early, find some success, and with this offensive line, that's what worries me. Is this running game going to get going? Are the Houston Texans going to continue to find themselves in 2nd and long and 3rd and long situations like against the Ravens? But Devin Singletary, our backup running back, we need him to come out the gate hot as well. Get us into 2nd and short, 3rd and short. But you're going to have to pound these 2 running backs, man. Try to.
So going off on a tangent here for a second, I wanted to ask your thoughts on Demeco Ryans, because that was the big thing in the offseason. Everyone was wondering who their next coaches were going to be. And there was obviously 5 different teams that got brand new head coaches. Both of our teams have one. We obviously have Shane Steichen now. You guys with Demeco Ryans. A lot of people would say that, Demeco may not have been the best hire if you were trying to go with a new quarterback, because he's more of a defensive guy than an offensive guy. But I always really like Demeco because he's a man of his word. He shows a lot of energy and excitement on the sideline. He's an amplified coach, and he's a guy that definitely, if you're a team that's looking to find an identity, Demeco Ryans certainly seems like a guy that can help you find one. What's your thoughts on when Houston decided to hire Demeco Ryans?
No, we were all excited because the question was, does Demeco even want to come to the Houston Texans? Does anyone want to coach the Houston Texans? That was a question just a couple of months ago. After getting Demeco Ryans, he said this was your dream hire. He changed this city, this franchise, as soon as he stepped into the building. There was a love for this football team again. Every single open training camp practice that they had available to the public, the line was from the metal detectors all the way to the very back parking gate entrance. These fans are invested. That's something you haven't seen in years. When you hear Demeco talk, right, he said how he wants to really develop players, and he brings up Fred Warner in his initial press conference with the Houston Texans. And the first thing he said about Fred Warner was, He's a married man. He's a God-fearing man, but he's also one of the best linebackers in the NFL. Like really caring about the person as well. And you kind of see that, here in Houston. Everyone loves Demeco Ryans. Our owners, Cal and Hannah McNair, Hannah called it the Demeco effect, why everyone is so excited for this Houston Texans team. And there's only one man of praise, and that is our head coach, Demeco Ryans.
Love that. Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's definitely great, to have some infusion of excitement, So that's great to see. That's great to hear that Demeco Ryans is doing well. He was probably one of, if not my favorite coaches in this whole process. And so glad to see you guys got a good one there after. Man, talk about just some uncertainty at the head coaching position. Having all these different coaches just year in, year out, just a new coach. I can't even imagine how refreshing it must be to have a coach that is seemingly here for the long haul finally.
Yeah, it feels like you got the right one. Because with David Culley, we knew he was a bridge coach, is not going to be here for the future, one and done. Lovie Smith, the same thing. He was a bridge coach. He even said that this is a veterans year, and he wasn't in the Houston Texans plans for the future. But with Demeco Ryans, you give him a 6-year deal. And this is a guy who was drafted by the Houston Texans, right? Like you see this, this story in movies. The guy who was drafted by the franchise and the franchise wasn't good, brought him to a little bit of relevancy. Then you're coming back to coach them, man. This is a movie that we Houston Texans fans are seeing right now. So we're excited for it.
Let's talk about special teams really quick. Just really quickly, and then we can go into some score predictions here. Obviously, you guys last week, you had a couple decent returns in the punt return category. Kicking wise, your kicker Fairburn ended up going 3 for 3 with a long of 38. So, that's definitely a good sign there. Punter hit 4 kicks for 176 yards with a 44 average. How do you feel about your team's special teams stacking up against ours? Because Indy had definitely a very interesting first week when it came to special teams. We had a couple times where Agnew really exposed the coverage team on our side. Matt Gay hit all of his kicks that he was brought out for, but sometimes it felt like Steichen just didn't want to use him because it felt like I don't know if he thought he was in his Philadelphia days where, they could just convert on 4th and 1. Well, Indy couldn't convert on 4th down in that game and left Matt Gay off the field a couple times when it felt like they could have used him. How do you feel in confidence wise about your special teams?
Yeah, the Houston Texans, they might throw out there a new punter. Our original punter, Cameron Johnson, on IR because of a calf, so more injury bugs. Kaimi Fairbairn, one of the better kickers in the NFL, no problem there. Our special teams is ran by Coach Frank Ross. He is as legit as they come. Some people see him as a future head coach. In terms of who is going to be returning kicks, you guys are going to see the Houston Texans 3rd-round pick Tank Dell. And Tank Dell is electric. He got an opportunity in the preseason against the Saints and, took it back to the Houston Texans 48-yard line. When he gets the ball in his hands, he was electric. With the University of Houston Cougars, was dynamic as well. I'm excited to see what Tank Dell does in his debut. As far as kick return wise, it might be Robert Woods. It might be Noah Brown. The Houston Texans have been trying to find themselves a kick returner or running back Mike Boone. But the special teams outside of the punter situation, I ain't comfortable with.
Awesome. Well, let's get into some score predictions now. Ruben, since you are our guest, we will let you have the first crack at it. What do you think the final score is, and who do you think ultimately comes out on top in this game?
I'm going to go 17-14 Texans. Okay. I think this is going to be a tight game, and it's going to come down to which rookie quarterback is going to make the big mistake. Last week, CJ Stroud didn't throw an interception. Anthony Richardson did. I think it was pretty late in the game also. The Houston Texans defense, they're going to have the crowd behind them. It is the first time we see Demeco and CJ and Will Anderson Jr., who was a monster. But 17-14, Houston Texans. and it's going to start off great for the head coach Demeco Ryans era.
All right, Derek, what do you think?
I'm going to end up going 27-21 Colts. Like I said, I can't ever say that the Colts will blow out the Texans because it's in recent memory, it just doesn't happen. Both these teams are in a rebuild, but I think Anthony Richardson is going to string together a couple of TDs in this game. Besides that one late interception when the game was already over, he was looking very efficient. I think he's going to approach this game the same way he always does, and I think the Colts are going to skate by late with a win here.
Okay. I had this score in my mind. I had 24-17 Indianapolis just because, I'm not saying that Indy's defense is anywhere near Baltimore's at this point, but they did a pretty decent job for most of the day shutting down Trevor Lawrence. Now, again, Jacksonville, they scored that because of that Agnew punt. They had great field position, but I felt like the Indy defense for the majority of the game, they were making life extremely difficult for Trevor Lawrence. And, I look at this Houston offense, and to be honest, I like TJ Stroud, but I don't think he's anywhere near what Trevor Lawrence is right now. And, with some injuries piling up on an offensive line, with how Indy's D-line is playing right now, I just don't see it. And I see him maybe having a couple plays because of, potentially having some plays on this young secondary. But for me, I don't know. It's just hard for me to imagine how well Indy played them just having a game where they score less than they did against Jacksonville. So I'll go 24-17, but I do think it'll be a very competitive game, that's for sure.
I hope so too, man.
Yeah. So, well, Ruben, man, thank you so much, man, for coming on. We really do appreciate your time. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, find what your work and all the stuff you do with the Houston Texans?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Just go on YouTube and search up 713 Houston Sportcast. It'll easily pop up. And on Twitter, at 713HSP, dropping daily Houston Texans content. And thank y'all so much for having me on, man. Feels good to talk some, football after so long.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's good to know. I feel like for a long time it was hard to find Texans content creators. I don't know if you feel that, but we were looking for a long time. You can only find a few. So it's good to have this connection, man. Really do appreciate it, like we said. And yeah, man, we tell everybody this every single week we play them. Good luck on Sunday, but not too much luck because we always root for a Colts win here. But anyway, man, we'll hope it's a great game for you. First home opener for you guys. It's always great, with the rookie quarterback and all that stuff. We experienced that last week. So ultimately, it's going to be a good game. Hopefully, everybody stays healthy, and ultimately, it's a good game all around.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank y'all so much.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for tuning in. Really do appreciate it. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, turn on that notification bell so that you are in the loop when we drop new content like this. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let us know your score predictions in the comments below. But thanks, guys, for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.